When ruthless CEO Landon Pierce crashes into a blizzard-struck forest, he's rescued by Clara Bennett, a woman whose simple life challenges everything he thought he knew. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The sleek black sedan cut through the New York City traffic like a shark through water. Inside, Landon Pierce stared at his phone, barely noticing the glittering Christmas lights that decorated the towering skyscrapers outside his window. At 28, he was one of the youngest CEOs in the luxury real estate market, and he intended to keep climbing. "Mr. Pierce," his driver called from the front seat, "your father is on the other line." Landon sighed. "Tell him I'll call back. I need to finish these contracts before I head upstate." The driver nodded silently. Landon had hired him specifically for his discretion and efficiency. No questions, no small talk, just service. That's how Landon liked all his relationships. Simple, transactional, and devoid of messy emotions. In his gleaming corner office on the 45th floor, Landon reviewed the documents for the Alpine Resort acquisition. This deal would be the crown jewel of Pierce Luxury Properties. He'd been working toward this for years, pushing aside everything and everyone to get here. A knock on his door interrupted his concentration. It was Jessica, his executive assistant. "Your father called again," she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. Everyone was afraid of disappointing Harrison Pierce, including his own son. "What does he want?" Landon asked without looking up. "To remind you about the board meeting tomorrow, and to tell you not to mess up the Alpine deal." Landon's jaw tightened. Even now, after everything he'd accomplished, his father still treated him like an incompetent child. "Tell him the deal is as good as done. I'm driving up there tonight to sign the papers myself." Jessica hesitated. "There's a storm warning for the mountains. Maybe you should wait until morning." "The world doesn't reward those who wait, Jessica. You should know that by now." 2 hours later, Landon sat in the back of his car as his driver navigated the increasingly treacherous mountain roads. The snow had started as a gentle flurry, but was now a raging blizzard. The trees on either side of the narrow road were bent under the weight of the snow, creating an eerie tunnel of white. "How much longer?" Landon asked, checking his watch impatiently. "About 40 minutes, sir, but I think we should turn back. This storm is getting worse by the minute." "That's not an option. Keep going." The driver gripped the wheel tighter, but didn't argue. Landon returned to his phone, scrolling through emails until he noticed the screen dimming. Battery at 5%. He cursed under his breath and reached for his charger, but before he could find it, the car began to slide. It happened so fast. The tires lost their grip on the icy road. The driver tried to regain control, but the sedan spun once, twice, and then crashed through the guardrail. Landon felt weightless for a terrifying moment before the car slammed into something solid and finally stopped. The silence afterward was deafening. Snow fell through the shattered window, landing on Landon's face. He blinked, trying to orient himself. The car was tilted at an angle, its front end wrapped around a tree. "James?" Landon called out to his driver. A groan from the front seat answered him. Landon unbuckled his seatbelt and carefully made his way to the front. James was conscious but bleeding from a cut on his head. His leg was pinned by the crushed dashboard. "My phone's dead," Landon said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Where's yours?" "Left pocket," James whispered. Landon reached over and retrieved the phone, but his hope died quickly. The screen was shattered, as useless as his own. "I need to find help," Landon decided. "Can you move?" James shook his head. "You shouldn't go out there, sir. The temperature's dropping fast." But Landon was already putting on his expensive wool coat. It was stylish, but hardly suitable for a blizzard. "I don't have a choice. I'll send help back for you." Stepping out of the car was like walking into a wall of ice. The wind cut through Landon's clothes, and the snow immediately soaked his leather dress shoes. He looked around, trying to get his bearings. The road was nowhere to be seen. They must have gone over the edge and slid down into the forest. Landon started walking uphill, figuring that would lead him back to the road. Each step was a battle against the snow and wind. His face burned from the cold, and he couldn't feel his fingers anymore. The elegant watch on his wrist, the one his father had given him when he made his first million, seemed to mock him now. What good was wealth when you were freezing to death He didn't know how long he'd been walking when he stumbled and fell to his knees. Getting up seemed impossible. Maybe he could just rest for a minute. A faint glow in the distance caught his eye. A light? Landon forced himself to his feet, drawn to that tiny beacon of hope. As he got closer, he could make out the shape of a small cabin, smoke rising from its chimney. With his last bit of strength, Landon staggered to the door and pounded on it with his fist. The world was starting to dim around the edges, and he was so cold he couldn't even shiver anymore. The door swung open and warmth spilled out like a blessing. A woman stood there, her face a blur to Landon's fading consciousness. "Help," he managed to say before his legs gave out beneath him. Clara Bennett was just adding another log to the fireplace when she heard the pounding at her door. Living alone in the woods, unexpected visitors were rare, especially during a blizzard. Her first instinct was caution. A single woman in an isolated cabin couldn't be too careful. But when she opened the door and saw the man collapsing in front of her, survival instincts took over. She caught him before he hit the ground, struggling under his weight. "Dad," she called out. "I need help." Robert Bennett appeared from the back room, leaning heavily on his cane. At 65, he wasn't as strong as he used to be, but together they managed to drag the unconscious stranger inside and lay him on the worn couch by the fire. "He's half frozen," Clara said, quickly removing the man's snow-covered coat and shoes. "Get me some blankets." As her father shuffled away, Clara took in the stranger's appearance. Even in his current state, she could tell he wasn't from around here. His clothes were expensive, his haircut precise. What was someone like him doing out in a blizzard? "He needs to get warm," her father said, returning with an armful of quilts. "Those fancy clothes of his aren't worth a damn in weather like this." Clara wrapped the blankets around the man and then gently patted his face. "Hey, can you hear me?" The stranger's eyelids fluttered. He mumbled something incoherent. "I think he's in shock," Clara said. "Help me make some tea." While her father put the kettle on, Clara continued to rub the man's hands, trying to restore circulation. His fingers were ice-cold and alarmingly white, early signs of frostbite. She moved quickly to the kitchen, filling a basin with lukewarm water. "Don't use hot water," her father warned. "I remember from my army days, too much heat too fast can do more harm than good." Clara nodded, bringing the basin back and carefully placing the stranger's hands in the water. As she worked, she studied his face. He was handsome in a sharp, polished way. His expression, even in unconsciousness, seemed stern, not the kind of man who smiled easily, she guessed. After about 20 minutes of careful attention, the stranger began to stir more purposefully. His eyes opened, revealing a piercing blue that reminded Clara of the lake in winter. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "You're safe," Clara answered. "You collapsed at my door. Do you remember how you got here?" The man tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "My car, there was an accident. My driver is still out there. He's hurt." Clara exchanged a worried look with her father. "Where exactly did you crash?" "I don't know, somewhere off the main road. We went through a guardrail." Robert reached for the phone on the wall. "I'll call Sheriff Dawson. He can organize a search." "Party? The roads will be impassable by now," Clara said, "but maybe he can send someone on the snowmobile." While her father made the call, Clara turned back to their unexpected guest. "What's your name?" Landon Pierce." He said it like it should mean something to her. "I'm Clara Bennett. That's my father, Robert. You're at Bennett Christmas Tree Farm, though we don't sell many trees these days." Landon looked around the cabin for the first time, taking in the modest surroundings. The furniture was old but well cared for. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with what looked like handmade ornaments. It was nothing like the professionally designed trees in his corporate lobby. "I need to make a call," he said, attempting again to sit up. "It's urgent. Phone lines are down because of the storm," Robert said, hanging up. "Hand cell service up here is spotty on a good day. Sheriff says he'll try to get someone out to look for your driver, but it might be hours." Landon's face hardened with frustration. "I have to be in Alpine Falls by morning. There's a contract." "You're not going anywhere tonight," Clara interrupted, handing him a mug of hot tea. "So you nearly died out there. Whatever business you have will have to wait." Landon looked ready to argue but was cut short by a violent shiver that ran through his body. Clara adjusted the blankets around him. "Drink your tea," she said firmly. "Once you're warmer, you can have something to eat." Landon took the mug reluctantly. The warmth spreading through his hands was both painful and soothing. "Thank you," he said, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. When was the last time he'd sincerely thanked someone? As the hot tea warmed him from the inside, Landon realized just how close he'd come to dying out there in the snow. The thought was unsettling. In New York, he controlled everything in his life down to the minute. Here, he was utterly helpless. Clara moved around the cabin with quiet efficiency, putting together a simple meal of soup and bread. There was something about her that caught Landon's attention. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional way of the women he usually dated, models and socialites who spent fortunes on their appearance. Clara's beauty was understated, natural. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her clothes were chosen for warmth rather than style. But it was her eyes that really struck him, warm brown and direct, meeting his gaze without the awe or intimidation he was used to seeing. She looked at him like he was just a man, not Landon Pierce, CEO of Pierce Luxury Properties. "Your driver will be okay," she said, misreading his stare as concern. "Sheriff Dawson knows these mountains better than anyone." "I should be there when they find him," Landon said. "And what would that accomplish except getting you lost again?" Clara asked bluntly. "The best thing you can do for your driver is stay put and get warm." Her frankness surprised him. People didn't talk to Landon that way. Even his executive team tiptoed around his temper. This woman had known him for less than an hour and was already telling him what to do. "Do you know who I am?" he asked before he could stop himself. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Should I?" "I'm the CEO of Pierce Luxury Properties. We develop high-end real estate across the country. Well, Mr. CEO, right now you're a man who nearly froze to death and is lucky to be alive. So eat your soup and rest. Your title doesn't mean much in a blizzard." Robert chuckled from his armchair. "That's my Clara, always straight to the point." Landon didn't know whether to be offended or impressed. He took a spoonful of the soup instead of responding. It was simple but delicious, warming him in a way that went beyond temperature. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the small cabin. Landon thought about James, still trapped in the car, and felt a twinge of guilt. He should have listened to his driver's warning about the storm. "Tell me about your driver," Clara said, sitting down across from him. "What's his name?" "James Reynolds," Landon answered. "He's worked for me for about 3 years. Is he married? Kids?" Landon opened his mouth to respond, but realized he didn't know. Despite spending hours in a car with James nearly every day, he'd never bothered to learn anything personal about the man. "I'm not sure," he admitted. Clara's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made Landon feel ashamed. He quickly changed the subject. "So, a Christmas tree farm? Isn't that seasonal work?" "It is," Clara nodded. "I do freelance graphic design the rest of the year, and Dad has his pension." "Clara could be making good money in the city," Robert said proudly. "She graduated top of her class from design school." "Dad," Clara warned. "What?" "It's true. She had offers from big agencies, but she came back here to take care of her old man instead." Landon looked at Clara with new interest. "Why would you do that? Give up a career to live out here in the middle of nowhere?" "Not everyone measures success by their bank account, Mr. Pierce," Clara replied. "I came home because family matters, more than a fancy job title." The simple statement hit Landon harder than he expected. In his world, success was everything. His own father had drummed that into him from childhood. After his mother died when he was 10, Harrison Pierce had raised his son with one goal: to be stronger, smarter, and more successful than everyone else. "Don't expect life to be fair," his father always said. "The only person you can count on is yourself." Looking around this humble cabin, seeing the easy affection between Clara and her father, Landon felt a strange emptiness inside. When was the last time he'd had a real conversation that wasn't about business? When had anyone looked at him with genuine warmth instead of what he could do for them? "Sheriff Dawson called back," Robert announced, hanging up the old wall phone. "They found your car and your driver. He's being taken to the hospital in Alpine Falls, but his injuries aren't life-threatening." Relief washed over Landon. "I need to get there." "Not happening," Robert shook his head. Sheriff says the roads are completely closed. No one's getting in or out until the storm passes and the plows can clear the way. Landon ran his hands through his hair in frustration. You don't understand. I have to sign those contracts by noon tomorrow or the deal falls through. I understand just fine, Clara said calmly, but unless you can control the weather, you're stuck here for the night. Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan, Mr. Pierce. The realization that he was truly trapped here hit Landon hard. No amount of money or influence could change his situation. For the first time in years, he was completely powerless. Clara seemed to sense his distress. Look, it's getting late. Why don't you get some rest? You can take my bedroom and I'll sleep on the couch. I couldn't, Landon started to protest. It's not up for debate, Clara interrupted. You're still recovering from hypothermia. You need proper rest. Too exhausted to argue, Landon allowed Clara to lead him to a small, neat bedroom. A handmade quilt covered the single bed, and the walls were decorated with watercolor paintings of the surrounding mountains. Did you paint these? Landon asked, gesturing to the artwork. Clara nodded. Just a hobby. They're good, he said, surprising himself with the compliment. You have talent. A faint blush colored Clara's cheeks. Thank you. There are extra blankets in the chest if you get cold. Bathrooms down the hall. As she turned to leave, Landon caught her hand impulsively. Thank you for saving my life. Clara's eyes widened slightly at the contact, but she didn't pull away. Anyone would have done the same. No, Landon said, suddenly certain. They wouldn't have. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary before Clara gently withdrew her hand. Good night, Mr. Pierce. Landon, he corrected. Please call me Landon. Good night, Landon, she said softly before closing the door. Alone in the small bedroom, surrounded by the unfamiliar smells of pine and wood smoke, Landon felt strangely disconnected from his real life. The deals, the meetings, the endless pursuit. Of more. It all seemed distant and somehow less important than it had this morning. As he drifted off to sleep, his last thought wasn't of the Alpine deal or his father's inevitable disappointment. Instead, he wondered what Clara Bennett's story was, and why a talented woman would choose this simple life over success in the city. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Landon Pierce was curious about someone else's life than focused solely on his own. Morning light filtered through the small window, waking Landon from the deepest sleep he'd had in years. For a moment, he didn't recognize his surroundings. The ceiling was wood instead of the sleek white of his penthouse. The air smelled of pine and something delicious cooking. Then it all came rushing back, the accident, the blizzard, and Clara Bennett, the woman who had saved his life. Landon sat up, wincing at the soreness in his muscles. His phone lay on the bedside table, still dead. Next to it, someone had left a neatly folded flannel shirt and a pair of jeans that looked like they might fit him. He changed out of his wrinkled shirt, surprised by how comfortable the borrowed clothes felt. When he stepped out of the bedroom, he found Clara in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on an old cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," she said, glancing up. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Landon admitted. "Though I still need to get to Alpine Falls. As soon as possible." Clara placed a stack of pancakes on the table. "Dad went to check with the neighbors about the roads. The storm passed, but there's nearly 3 feet of snow out there. Plows probably won't reach us until this afternoon." Landon's jaw clenched in frustration. Every hour that passed put his deal in jeopardy. His father's voice echoed in his head. "Excuses are for the weak, son. Is there a landline I can use?" "I need to make some calls." Clara gestured to the phone on the wall. "Lines are back up this morning. Coffee?" Landon nodded gratefully and went to the phone. He dialed his assistant's number from memory. "Jessica? It's Landon." He kept his voice low, aware that Clara could hear him from the kitchen. "I've been in an accident. I'm fine, but I'm stranded in... Actually, I don't know exactly where I am." "Bennett Christmas Tree Farm," Clara called out. "About 15 miles east of Alpine Falls." Landon relayed the information, then continued, "Call Alpine Resort and tell them I need an extension on the signing, and send a helicopter as soon as the weather clears." He hung up and turned to find Clara watching him with an unreadable expression. She placed a mug of coffee in front of him. "Your world doesn't slow down, does it?" she asked. "It can't afford to." Landon replied, taking a seat at the small kitchen table. There's too much at stake. Clara sat across from him, cradling her own mug. What exactly is so important that you risked driving through a blizzard? Landon took a bite of pancake before answering. It was delicious, fluffy and golden, nothing like the protein shakes he usually had for breakfast. I'm acquiring Alpine Resort, he explained. It's the cornerstone of a new luxury development we're planning. High-end vacation homes, a spa, a golf course, the works. It's going to transform this entire region. Transform it how? Clara asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Economic growth, jobs, tourism. It's a win for everyone. Not for those who prefer things the way they are, Clara countered. Some people choose to live here because they want peace and quiet, not luxury resorts and golf courses. Landon studied her face. Most people he dealt with were either impressed by his vision or eager to profit from it. Clara's skepticism was new. Progress is inevitable, he said. Those who resist it get left behind. Is that what you tell yourself to justify bulldozing over people's lives? Clara asked, her tone still calm, but with a sharpness underneath. Before Landon could respond, the door opened and Robert came in, stomping snow from his boots. Roads are still blocked, he announced, but Bill Thompson has his snowplow attached to his truck. Says he'll clear the way to the main road by noon if the county hasn't gotten to it by then. Thank God, Landon said with relief. I need to check. On my driver at the hospital, then get to the resort. Robert hung up his coat. Bill also said they found your car. Total loss, I'm afraid. Landon shrugged. It's insured. The casual way he dismissed the loss of an expensive vehicle wasn't lost on Clara. She rose to clear the breakfast dishes, her movements more abrupt than before. I should head back to the bedroom and make some more calls, Landon said suddenly. Uncomfortable under Clara's scrutiny. As he stood, Robert placed a hand on his arm. Hold on, young man, the phone can wait. You still owe my daughter a proper thank you for saving your life. Dad, Clara protested. It's fine. No, it's not, Robert insisted. You've given up your bed, cooked for him, and this fella acts like, here it's all just expected. Landon felt heat rise to his face. The older man was right. He'd been so focused on his business problems that he'd barely acknowledged what Clara had done for him. You're right, sir, Landon said, turning to Clara. I haven't properly thanked you. What you did last night, not everyone would have helped a stranger in that situation. Clara's expression softened slightly. Like I said, anyone would have done the same. No, Landon shook his head. They wouldn't. In my world, people only do things when there's something in it for them. You didn't even know who I was, and you helped me anyway. That says more about your world than it does about me, Clara replied quietly. The simple truth of her statement hit Landon hard. When was the last time someone had done something for him without expecting anything in return? Even his so-called friends were mostly business connections, people who wanted to be seen with him or needed his influence. A sudden impulse made him ask, "Can I see the Christmas tree farm?" Surprise flickered across Clara's face. Why? I'm curious, Landon admitted. I've never been to one before. Clara exchanged a glance with her father, who nodded encouragingly. All right, she agreed. Let me get you some proper boots first. Those Italian leather shoes of yours won't last 5 minutes in the snow. 10 minutes later, bundled in borrowed coats and boots, they stepped outside the cabin. The world had been transformed overnight into a breathtaking winter wonderland. Snow covered everything, glittering in the morning sun. The air was crisp and clean in a way Landon had never experienced in the city. It's beautiful, he said, surprising himself with the genuine amazement in his voice. Clara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, lighting up her eyes and revealing a small dimple in her right cheek. The farm starts just beyond those trees, she said, leading the way. It's not much these days, but it was my grandfather's pride and joy. They trudged through the deep snow, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. As they passed through a line of tall pines, the land opened up to reveal rows upon rows of Christmas trees in various stages of growth. Most were covered in snow, creating a scene straight out of a holiday card. We have about 5 acres of trees, Clara explained. Some are ready for harvest this year, others won't be ready for another 4 or 5 years. It's a constant cycle. How does it work? Landon asked, genuinely interested. Do people just come and cut down any tree they want? Clara laughed, the sound bright in the winter stillness. Not exactly. We mark the trees that are ready each season. People come, choose one, and then we cut it for them. Or they can cut it themselves if they want the experience. She led him deeper into the farm, pointing out different varieties: Fraser firs, blue spruces, white pines. Landon listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge and passion. Business has been slow the last few years, Clara admitted as they reached a small shed at the far end of the property. The big box stores sell artificial trees for half the price, and there's a commercial tree farm closer to the highway that gets most of the weekend tourists. So why keep doing it? Landon asked. In his world, a failing business was something to cut your losses on, not persevere with. Clara's expression grew wistful. This land has been in my family for generations. My grandfather planted some of these trees, and there's still something special about a real Christmas tree that an artificial one can't match. She bent down and brushed snow from a tiny sapling, barely visible above the white blanket covering the ground. This little guy will be someone's Christmas tree in 2030. There's something hopeful about that, don't you think? Planting something now that will bring joy years from now? Landon had never thought that way. His business deals were about immediate profits, not long-term legacies. The idea of nurturing something for years with such uncertain returns seemed foreign to him. What if it doesn't survive? He asked. Then we plant another, Clara said simply. That's life. You can't control everything, but you keep trying anyway. They continued walking, their conversation flowing more easily now. Clara told him about growing up on the farm, about her college years in the city, and her decision to return home when her father's health began to decline 2 years ago. He had a mild heart attack, she explained. Nothing serious, but it scared me. I realized time with him was more precious than any career. You gave up everything to come back. Landon couldn't imagine making such a sacrifice. Not everything, Clara corrected. I adjusted my priorities. I still do design work remotely. It's not the fast track to success, but it's enough. And you don't regret it? Landon pressed. The opportunities you missed? Clara stopped walking and turned to face him. Do you ever stop to wonder what you might be missing with your singular focus on success, Landon? What opportunities for connection and meaning you've sacrificed along the way? The directness of her question caught him off guard. No one in his life spoke to him this way. His employees were too afraid, his father too focused on the bottom line, and the women he dated were typically interested in his wealth and status rather than challenging his worldview. Before he could answer, the distant sound of an engine broke. The silence. They both turned to see a truck with a snowplow attachment making its way toward the cabin. That must be Bill, Clara said. Looks like your ride out of here is coming sooner than expected. Landon felt a strange reluctance as they walked back toward the cabin. In just a few hours, he'd be back in his world of deals and deadlines. The peace he'd found here in the snow-covered forest with Clara would be just a memory. At the cabin, Bill Thompson confirmed that the main road had been cleared by the county plows. I can drive you to Alpine Falls whenever you're ready, he told Landon. Thank you, Landon said, then turned to Clara. I should get my things. In the bedroom, Landon changed back into his own clothes, now dry but wrinkled. His phone was still dead, a strange relief. A few more minutes without the constant demands of his life. When he emerged, Clara was waiting with a small paper bag. Some sandwiches for the road, she said. It's about an hour to Alpine Falls. You didn't have to do that, Landon said, touched by the gesture. It's no trouble. An awkward silence fell between them. Landon knew he should leave. His deal was waiting. His driver was in the hospital. His entire business depended on him getting to Alpine Falls as soon as possible. Yet something made him hesitate. Clara, he began, not sure what he wanted to say. You should go, she interrupted, gently. Your world is waiting. Landon nodded, reaching into his pocket for his wallet. Let me give you something for your help. For the food, the clothes, everything. Clara's expression closed off immediately. We don't want your money, Landon. I insist, he pressed, pulling out his checkbook. It's the least I can do. Is that how you solve all your problems? Clara asked, her voice suddenly cold. Throwing money at them. It's not like that, Landon protested. I just want to show my gratitude. Then say thank you, Clara replied. Not everything has a price tag. Robert, who had been watching the exchange, cleared his throat. Clara's right, son. Some things can't be bought or sold. Landon felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He'd meant well, but somehow he'd offended. Them? I'm sorry, he said stiffly, putting away his checkbook. I didn't mean to insult you. You didn't, Clara sighed. You don't understand. Then, help me understand, Landon found himself saying. But Bill Thompson was honking his horn outside, and the moment passed. Clara handed Landon the bag of sandwiches and opened the door. Goodbye, Landon Pierce, she said. Good luck with your resort. Landon hesitated at the threshold. Will I see you again? Clara gave him a small, sad smile. Why would you want to? We live in different worlds. Because I've never met anyone like you, Landon admitted, the words coming from somewhere deep inside him. For a moment, something flickered in Clara's eyes, surprise perhaps, or a reflection of his own confused emotions. But then she looked. Away. Safe travels, she said quietly. Take care of yourself. Landon walked out to Bill's truck, the snow crunching under his feet. As he climbed into the passenger seat, he looked back at the small cabin with its curl of smoke rising from the chimney. Clara stood in the doorway, a solitary figure framed by warm light from inside. Bill put the truck in gear and they pulled away, the cabin growing smaller in the side mirror. Landon felt a strange ache in his chest, as if he was leaving something important behind. Something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Nice folks, the Bennetts, Bill commented as they drove. Salt of the earth, those two. Yes, Landon agreed quietly. They are. As the truck navigated the snow-covered roads toward Alpine Falls, Landon's mind was already racing ahead to the deal waiting for him, the calls he needed to make, the empire he had to maintain. But a small part of him remained back at that cabin, with a woman who had looked at him and seen not his wealth or his power, but just a man lost in a storm. A woman who had made him question, for the first time in years, what success really meant. The Alpine Grand Resort lobby buzzed with activity as Landon strode through the revolving doors. Heads turned, whispers followed. He was used to it. The recognition, the deference, the immediate shift in energy when he entered a room. After 2 days in borrowed flannel and the simple warmth of the Bennett cabin, the polished marble and crystal chandeliers felt almost garish. Mr. Pierce, the resort manager hurried over, hand extended. We've been so worried since we heard about your accident. Are you all right? I'm fine, Richard, Landon replied, his business mask firmly back, in place. Where's my team? In the conference room, sir. They arrived by helicopter about an hour ago. Landon nodded and headed for the elevator, aware of the curious glances following him. His wrinkled suit and the lingering scent of wood smoke from Clara's cabin made him conspicuous among the resort's polished perfection. In the conference room, Jessica jumped up when he entered. Landon! Thank God you're okay. We've been going crazy trying to reach you. Behind her, a team of lawyers and executives looked up from their papers with expressions of relief. At the head of the table sat the one person Landon had been dreading. Facing his father, Harrison Pierce at 65 was still an imposing figure. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his custom suit immaculate. His cold blue eyes, so like Landon's own, assessed his son with a critical stare. So you decided to join us after all, Harrison said, his voice devoid of any concern for his son's well-being. The owners have generously extended the deadline until 5 o'clock today. No, are you okay? No, I was worried. Just business, as always. I need to check on my driver first, Landon said. He's in the hospital. Harrison's eyebrow rose slightly. Jessica can handle that. We have a deal to close. I'll handle it myself, Landon replied, a note of defiance in his voice that surprised even him. The papers will still be here in an hour. Without waiting for his father's response, Landon turned and left the room. In the elevator going down, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. 2 days ago, he wouldn't have thought twice about delegating the task of checking on his injured employee. What had changed? Clara's voice echoed in his mind. Is that how you solve all your problems? Throwing money at them? At the hospital, Landon found James Reynolds in a private room, his leg in a cast, a bandage on his forehead. The driver's eyes widened in surprise when Landon walked in. "Mr. Pierce, I didn't expect you to come. How are you feeling?" Landon asked, suddenly awkward. He'd never visited an employee in the hospital before. "Better, sir. Doctor says I'll be out in a day or two. Just a broken leg and some cuts." Landon nodded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Good. That's good. I wanted to thank you. You tried to warn me about the storm." James looked genuinely shocked. "Just doing my job, sir." "Well, I should have listened." Landon paused, then added, "The company will cover all your medical expenses, of course, and you'll continue to receive your full salary while you recover." "Thank you, sir. That's very generous." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Landon realized he knew almost nothing about this man who drove him almost every day. "Do you have family, James?" he asked suddenly. The question seemed to surprise the driver. "Yes, sir, a wife and 2 daughters, 6 and 8. Will they be able to manage while you're recovering? Do they need anything?" James stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. "We'll be fine, Mr. Pierce. My wife works too." Landon nodded, feeling strangely relieved. "Good. That's good. If you do need anything, let me know directly." He left soon after, but the brief visit had unsettled him in ways he couldn't quite explain. He'd never considered the lives of his employees beyond their usefulness to him. Now he found himself wondering how many James Reynoldses worked for him. People with families and stories he knew nothing about. Back at the resort, Landon found the deal proceeding smoothly in his absence. His team had worked out most of the details, leaving only the final negotiations and signatures. Harrison watched with barely concealed impatience as Landon reviewed the paperwork. "Everything seems in order," Landon finally said. "I'd like to speak with the owners privately before we sign." The elderly couple who owned Alpine Resort looked surprised but pleased by the request. In a smaller meeting room, Landon sat across from them, aware of his father watching through the glass wall. So with narrowed eyes, "Mr. and Mrs. Keller, before we finalize this deal, I want to be completely transparent about our plans," Landon began. "The resort will undergo significant renovations. We'll be expanding the main building and adding a luxury condo complex on the eastern slope." Mr. Keller nodded. "Yes, your team showed us the renderings. It's going to be quite different." "It will completely change the character of this place," Landon admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "Some of the locals might not appreciate the development," Mrs. Keller sighed. "We know. We've run this place for 40 years. It's part of the community. But we're getting too old to keep up with it, and none of our children wanted to take over." "What about your staff?" Landon asked. "Most of them are local, right?" "All of them," Mr. Keller confirmed. "Some have been with us for decades." For the first time, Landon felt a twinge of doubt about the Alpine project. Before meeting Clara, he'd seen it purely as a business opportunity, land to be developed, profits to be made. Now he found himself thinking about the community his development would impact. "I'll make sure we retain as many of your staff as possible during the transition," he heard himself promising. "And we'll work with local contractors for the renovation when feasible." The Kellers looked relieved, and Landon realized his father was still watching, his expression hardening with each concession. After the meeting, Harrison cornered him in the hallway. "What was that about? Those promises will cut into our profit margin." "It's the right thing to do," Landon replied simply. "The right thing," Harrison repeated incredulously. "Since when do you care about that? Our job is to maximize returns for our investors, not play community hero." "Can't we do both?" Landon challenged. "Build something profitable that also respects the local community?" Harrison studied his son with clinical detachment. "You hit your head in that accident, or did something else happen out there in the woods?" Landon thought of Clara, her quiet strength, her clear principles, the way she'd seen right through his usual defenses. "Maybe I just had time to think." "Well, think on your own time," Harrison snapped. "We have signatures to collect and a press release to issue." The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork, handshakes and congratulations. By evening, Pierce Luxury Properties officially owned Alpine Resort, and the development plans were set in motion. Landon should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt oddly hollow. At the celebratory dinner that night, surrounded by his team and industry partners, Landon found himself unable to focus on the conversation around him. His thoughts kept drifting back to a small cabin and a Christmas tree farm 15 miles away. "Earth to Landon," Jessica said, nudging him. "The marketing team is asking about the press tour next week." Landon blinked, forcing himself back to the present. "Right, schedule it as planned. I'll be there." After dinner, he declined the invitation to continue the celebration at the resort bar. Instead, he retreated to his suite, loosening his tie. As he walked to the window, the view was spectacular. Moonlight on snow-covered mountains, the resort's tasteful outdoor lighting illuminating the pristine landscape. In the distance, he could make out the direction of Bennett Christmas Tree Farm, though the cabin itself was too far to see. Was Clara out there now, perhaps sitting by her fire reading a book? Did she ever think about him, or had he already faded from her mind? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Harrison, a glass of scotch in hand. "Thought we should talk," his father said, inviting himself in. "You weren't yourself today," Landon sighed. "I'm tired, Dad. It's been a long couple of days." Harrison settled into an armchair, studying his son. "Who were they? The people who found you?" "A woman and her father. They own a small Christmas tree farm." "Ah." Harrison's tone suggested he'd solved a puzzle. "A pretty country girl got under your skin, is that it?" Landon felt a flash of irritation. "Her name is Clara, and she's not what you think." "She's exactly what I think," Harrison countered. "Some simple, salt-of-the-earth type who made you question your priorities for a minute. It's a classic scenario, son. Happened to me once, too, back in my 30s. "What happened?" Landon asked despite himself. Harrison shrugged. "Reality set in. You can have a fling with that kind of woman, but you can't build a life with her. Different worlds." The casual dismissal angered Landon more than he expected. "You don't even know her?" "I don't need to, I know you." Harrison leaned forward. "You're my son. You're ambitious, driven, destined for greater things than playing house with some tree farmer. Whatever romantic notions this girl stirred up, they'll pass." Landon turned back to the window, unwilling to let his father see how much his words had affected him. "Is that all you came to say?" Harrison sighed and stood. "The helicopter leaves at 9 tomorrow. We have meetings in New York at noon." When the door closed behind his father, Landon remained at the window, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. Who was that man in the expensive suit? 2 days ago, he wouldn't have questioned anything his father had said. Now he found himself wondering if there was more to life than the relentless pursuit of wealth and power that had defined his existence. He pulled out his phone, now charged and buzzing with notifications. Hundreds of emails, missed calls, meeting requests, his normal life demanding his attention. But instead of diving back in, he opened a new contact entry and hesitated. He didn't have Clara's number. He didn't even know if she had a cell phone out at that cabin. The realization bothered him more than it should have. For the first time in his adult life, Landon Pierce couldn't simply call or text to get what he wanted. The next morning, Landon was up before dawn. Instead of preparing for the helicopter flight back to New York, he left a note for Jessica, explaining he'd drive back later, and headed down to the resort garage. After arranging for a rental car, he found himself driving through the still dark morning, following the directions Bill Thompson had given him the day before. He wasn't sure what he was doing or what he would say when he got there. All he knew was that he couldn't leave without seeing Clara one more time. The Bennett cabin looked different in the pre-dawn light, smaller, more isolated than he remembered. Smoke curled from the chimney, the only sign that someone was awake. Inside, Landon sat in the car for several minutes, gathering his courage. What was he even doing here? What could someone like Clara possibly see in someone like him? Finally, he stepped out into the cold morning air and approached the door. Before he could knock, it opened and Clara stood there in a thick sweater and jeans, a steaming mug in her hand. She didn't look surprised to see him. "I saw your headlights," she explained. "Kinda hard to miss visitors out here." "I hope I'm not interrupting anything," Landon said awkwardly. Clara's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Just my morning coffee. Want some?" She led him inside where the fire was already building in the hearth. The cabin felt different without the urgency of the storm, cozier, more intimate. Robert was nowhere to be seen. "Dad's still asleep," Clara said, as if reading his thoughts. "He likes to sleep in these days." She poured Landon a mug of coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table, an echo of their breakfast the day before. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Did your business go well?" Clara finally asked. Landon nodded. "The deal closed yesterday." "Congratulations," she said, though her tone was neutral. "So you're heading back to New York?" "That's the plan. My father's already expecting me on the helicopter this morning." Clara studied him over her mug. "But you're here instead." "I needed to see you again," Landon admitted. "I can't stop thinking about you, about this place. Everything feels different since I met you." Clara's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained cautious. "Different how?" Landon struggled to find the words. "I've spent my entire life chasing success, thinking that was all that mattered. You made me question that." "I didn't do anything," Clara said quietly. "I just live my life according to my own values. Values I never even considered," Landon acknowledged. "Family, community, meaningful work rather than just profitable work." Clara set down her mug. "Landon, what are you doing here? Really?" The directness of her question demanded honesty. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I couldn't leave without seeing you again." "And then what? You go back to your world of high-rises and hostile takeovers, and I stay here with my trees and my dad?" "It doesn't have to be that way," Landon insisted, reaching for her hand across the table. To his relief, she didn't pull away. "We could figure something out." Clara's expression was gentle but skeptical. "You'd give up your empire for a Christmas tree farm?" "No," Landon said honestly. "But maybe I could build something better, something that doesn't just make money, but actually helps people. Would that be so impossible?" "It's not impossible," Clara said softly. "But it would mean changing who you are at your core. That kind of change doesn't happen overnight because of one snowstorm and a pretty girl." "You're right," Landon conceded. "But it did make me want to try. That has to count for something." Clara looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for something in his eyes. Whatever she saw there made her sigh. "Landon, The sound of a helicopter cut through the morning quiet, growing louder by the second. They both looked up as the noise became deafening, then moved to the window. A sleek corporate helicopter was descending toward the clearing near the cabin. "Let me guess," Clara said dryly. "Your dad?" Landon's jaw tightened. "Probably. He's not big on taking no for an answer." The helicopter landed, whipping snow into a frenzy. The door slid open, and Harrison Pierce stepped out, impeccably dressed in a long wool coat. He surveyed the humble cabin with obvious disdain before striding toward the door. "You should go," Clara said, stepping back from Landon. "This is your world calling you home." "Clara, wait!" A sharp knock interrupted him. Robert appeared from the back bedroom, hair tousled from sleep, just as Clara opened the door. Harrison didn't wait for an invitation. "Landon," he said, ignoring Clara completely. "The board meeting starts in 3 hours. We need to leave now." "Dad, this is Clara Bennett," Landon said firmly, "and her father, Robert. They saved my life during the storm." Harrison gave them a cursory glance and a tight smile. "Yes, thank you for that. The company will be sending you a suitable token of appreciation." "We don't want your money," Robert said bluntly. Harrison's smile didn't waver. "Everyone wants money, sir. It's just a question of the amount." He turned back to Landon. "Now, can we please go? The pilot says another storm is moving in this afternoon." Landon felt torn between two worlds. The rational part of him knew his father was right. He had responsibilities, commitments, a company depending on him. But something deeper, something he'd only just discovered, made him hesitate. "Give me 5 minutes," he finally said. Harrison looked like he wanted to argue, but instead checked his watch with obvious impatience. 5 minutes, then we leave, with or without you." He turned and walked back to the helicopter. When the door closed, Clara looked at Landon with understanding in her eyes. "It's okay, you should go." "I don't want to," Landon admitted, "but I have to." Clara nodded. "I know. That's your life. But it doesn't have to be my only life, Landon insisted. Clara, I know this sounds crazy. We barely know each other. But there's something here, something real. I felt it the moment I woke up in your home. Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I felt it too. But feeling something and building something are two different things. Then let me try to build something, Landon pleaded. Give me a chance to show you I can be more than the man who arrived on your doorstep. The helicopter's engine revved outside, an impatient reminder that his time was running out. I have to go, Landon said, the words painful in his throat. But I'll come back, I promise you, Clara, this isn't goodbye. For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Then she reached up and gently touched his face. Don't make promises you can't keep, Landon Pierce. Before he could respond, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Safe travels, she whispered. Landon wanted to say more, to make her understand that he meant every word, but the helicopter horn blared and the moment was gone. With a last look at Clara standing in the doorway of her simple cabin, Landon stepped back into the world he'd always known, but suddenly found wanting. As the helicopter lifted off, he watched the Bennett Christmas tree farm grow smaller below them, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life by leaving, or if he'd have made a bigger one by staying. Beside him, Harrison handed over a folder of documents, already moving on to the next deal, the next acquisition. Landon took the folder automatically, but his mind remained below with a woman who had changed everything in just 2 days. She'll forget you within a week, Harrison said, correctly interpreting his son's distraction. And you'll forget her when the next deal comes along. That's how it works, son. Landon didn't respond. He wasn't sure his father was wrong. That was the terrifying part. How easy it would be to slip back into his old life, to let the memory of Clara Bennett fade like a pleasant dream. But as the helicopter turned toward New York and the familiar skyline came into view, Landon made a silent promise to himself. This time would be different. This time he wouldn't forget. 3 weeks had passed since Landon left the Bennett Christmas tree farm. The New York skyline glittered outside his penthouse window, a perfect winter evening in the city. Everything in his life had returned to normal. Board meetings, business, dinners, contract negotiations, everything except Landon himself. Mr. Pierce, his new assistant Marcus, appeared at the office door. The development team is waiting in the conference room for your decision on the Alpine project. Landon nodded, gathering the folder of revised plans he'd been reviewing. Since returning to New York, he'd ordered his team to completely rethink the Alpine resort development. They'd been shocked, then concerned, then reluctantly impressed as Landon pushed them toward a new vision. In the conference room, his executive team and architects waited nervously. Harrison sat at the far end of the table, his expression guarded. He'd been watching Landon closely these past weeks, clearly worried about the changes in his son. Let's get started, Landon said, taking his place at the head of the table. I've reviewed all the proposals and I've made my decision. The room tensed. Millions of dollars were at stake, not to mention Landon's reputation as a ruthless, profit-driven developer. We're going with Plan C, Landon announced. The eco-friendly, community-integrated approach. Murmurs ran around the table. Plan C was the least profitable of the options, though still a sound investment. It preserved most of the resort's original character while modernizing it, included partnerships with local businesses, and set aside 20 acres as protected forest. Son, Harrison spoke up, his voice tight with disapproval. I think we should discuss this privately before... The decision is made, Dad, Landon interrupted firmly. Pierce Luxury Properties is changing direction, starting with Alpine. After the meeting, Harrison followed Landon back to his office, closing the door behind them. What the hell are you doing? He demanded. That plan will cut our profits by 30%. It will also create a development people actually love, Landon countered. Not just one they can afford. It will support the local community instead of pushing them out. And it will preserve what makes Alpine special in the first place. Harrison studied his son with cold calculation. This is about that girl, isn't it? You're throwing away everything we've built because some country girl batted her eyelashes at you. This isn't about Clara, Landon said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. It's about the kind of man I want to be, the kind of legacy I want to leave." "Legacy?" Harrison scoffed. "Your mother filled your head with that sentimental nonsense. I tried to teach you what really matters in this world. And what's that, Dad? Money, power. Looking at my life through your eyes, all I see is emptiness." Landon's voice softened. "Is that why you're so angry all the time? Because deep down you know something's missing?" Harrison's face hardened. "Don't psychoanalyze me, boy. I built this company from nothing. Everything you have you owe to me." "I know," Landon acknowledged, "and I'm grateful. But it's my company now, and I'm going to run it my way." Harrison's laugh was bitter. "For now. But the board won't stand for these bleeding heart policies for long, not when they see the quarterly reports." "Then I'll convince them," Landon said simply, "or I'll buy them out." Father and son faced each other across the desk, the resemblance between them striking despite their opposed positions. Finally, Harrison shook his head in disgust. "You're making a mistake," he said, moving toward the door. "And when it all falls apart, don't come crying to me." When the door closed behind his father, Landon sank into his chair. The confrontation had been inevitable, but it still left him drained. For 28 years, he'd measured his worth by his father's approval. Living without it would take getting used to. His gaze fell on his phone sitting on the desk. For 3 weeks, he'd thought about calling Clara, but what would he say? That he was changing, that he missed her. Words seemed inadequate, especially over the phone. He needed to show her, not tell her. That evening, alone in his penthouse, Landon sat at his desk with a piece of stationery in front of him. Not company letterhead with the Pierce logo, but simple cream-colored paper. He'd never been good at expressing his feelings, had rarely needed to, but now he found himself searching for the right words. After several false starts, he began to write, not as Landon Pierce, CEO, but simply as Landon, a man who had lost his way and found something unexpected in a snowstorm. At the Bennett farm, December had brought a flurry of activity. The weeks before Christmas were their busiest time of year, with families coming to choose their trees. Clara worked from dawn until dusk, helping customers, serving hot chocolate, and creating wreaths from the trimmed branches. The work was a welcome distraction. Since Landon had left in his father's helicopter, Clara had tried her best to forget him. It was ridiculous to feel so attached to someone she'd known for barely 2 days. And yet, she found herself looking up whenever headlights appeared on the road to the farm. "You've been quiet lately," her father commented one evening as they sat by the fire. "Thinking about that city fella?" Clara smiled faintly. Her father knew her too well. "Sometimes. It's silly, I know." Robert shook his head. "Not silly, he was different. I could see it in the way he looked at you. He's from another world, Dad. Men like Landon Pierce don't end up with women who run Christmas tree farms." "Maybe not," Robert agreed. "But then again, most men like him don't end up half frozen on our doorstep either. Life has a funny way of surprising you." Clara wanted to believe that, but as the days passed with no word from Landon, hope faded. He'd probably forgotten her already, busy with his business empire and glamorous New York life. On Christmas Eve, the farm closed early. Their final customers, the Wilson family, had just left with their tree when Robert called out from the cabin. "Clara, come quick, you need to see this." She hurried inside to find her father standing at the window, pointing to the road. A black SUV was making its way up the snowy path. "Is it him?" Robert asked, a hint of excitement in his voice. Clara's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Probably just a late customer. They watched as the vehicle stopped in front of the cabin. But instead of Landon, a uniformed driver stepped out and approached the door. "Miss Bennett?" he asked when Clara opened the door. "Yes? I have a delivery for you." He handed her a simple white envelope with just her name written on it in elegant handwriting. "Who sent this?" Clara asked, but the driver was already returning. "To his vehicle. I was just instructed to deliver it, ma'am. Merry Christmas." Clara stood in the doorway, the envelope trembling slightly in her hand as the SUV drove away. "Well?" Robert prompted. "Aren't you going to open it?" Inside the cabin, Clara sat by the fire and carefully opened the envelope. A single sheet of paper was inside, covered in a strong masculine handwriting. "Dear Clara, I've started this letter 100 times in my head, trying to find the perfect words. But I'm learning that sometimes perfect isn't what matters. It's being real, being honest. The night I stumbled to your door, I was lost in more ways than one. I had everything society told me I should want: success, wealth, power. But I was empty inside. In the warmth of your cabin, in the simple kindness you showed a stranger, I found something I didn't even know I was missing. These past weeks have been the hardest of my life, not because of business challenges, but because I've been wrestling with who I really am and who I want to be. The man who left your cabin that day isn't the same man writing this letter. I don't expect you to believe me. Words are easy. Actions matter more. That's why I've redesigned the Alpine project to preserve the forest, support local businesses, and respect the community. It's a small step, but it's just the beginning. I'm not asking you for anything. I haven't earned that right. I just wanted you to know that a snowstorm and 2 days with you changed the course of my life. Whatever happens next, I'll always be grateful for that. If you ever want to reach me for any reason, I've included my private number. No pressure, no expectations, just an open door. Wishing you and your father a Merry Christmas, Landon. Clara read the letter twice, then a third time, tears gathering in her eyes. It wasn't a grand declaration or an extravagant gesture. It was something more valuable, an honest reflection from a man trying to change. "You okay, sweetheart?" Robert asked, watching her with concern. Clara nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "He wrote me a letter, and he's trying to be different." Robert smiled gently. "People can change, Clara. Your mother always believed that. She saw the good in me when no one else did, remember?" Clara did remember. Her father had been a different man before he met her mother, harder, angrier, wounded by life. Her mother's love had healed something in him, had shown him another way to be. "I don't know what to do, Dad," Clara admitted. Robert took her hand. "You'll figure it out, you always do. Just remember what your mother used to say. The heart knows what it wants, even when the head tries to talk it out of it," Clara finished, smiling at the familiar saying. Outside, snow began to fall gently, decorating the Christmas trees with a fresh coat of white. Clara stood at the window, watching the flakes dance in the porch light. Somewhere out there, Landon was spending his Christmas Eve alone. The thought made her heart ache. "I'm going out for a bit," she told her father suddenly. Robert raised an eyebrow. "In this weather? Where to?" Clara picked up her phone. "I need to make a call first, to an old friend in town." An hour later, Clara sat in Bill Thompson's truck as he drove her through the snowy night. The roads were quiet on Christmas Eve, most people already home with their families. "You sure about this?" Bill asked, glancing over at her. "It's quite a drive in this weather." "I'm sure," Clara said, feeling more certain with each mile. "Thank you for doing this," Bill chuckled. "Your dad and mine were friends for 40 years. Least I could do. Besides, I'm curious to see this fellow who's got you driving through a snowstorm on Christmas Eve." As they approached Alpine Resort, Clara felt a flutter of nerves. What if Landon wasn't there? What if he was, but with someone else? What if his letter was just words, not matched by real change? But when they pulled up to the resort entrance, she pushed those doubts aside. Sometimes you had to take a chance. Had to trust your heart even when logic said otherwise. "Want me to wait?" Bill asked as she stepped out of the truck. Clara shook her head. "No, whatever happens, I'll figure it out. Thank you again, Bill. Merry Christmas." The resort lobby was decorated for the holidays, a massive tree glittering with lights in the center. A few guests milled about, but the reception desk was quiet as Clara approached. "Excuse me," she said to the young woman behind the counter. "I'm looking for Landon Pierce. Is he staying here?" The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Pierce is in the owner's suite, but he's not accepting visitors this evening. Would you like to leave a message?" Clara hesitated. "Could you call him? Tell him Clara Bennett is here." The receptionist looked uncertain, but picked up the phone. Clara waited, heart pounding, as she spoke quietly into the receiver. After a moment, the young woman's expression changed to surprise. "Yes, sir. Right away." She hung up and turned to Clara. "The elevator to your right. Top floor. Mr. Pierce is waiting for you." The elevator ride felt endless. Clara watched the floor numbers climb, wondering if she was making a mistake. But when the doors opened, all doubts vanished. Landon stood there casually dressed in jeans and a sweater, so different from the polished businessman who had left her cabin. His face showed open shock, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, Clara, he said, his voice rough with emotion. What are you doing here? Clara stepped out of the elevator, suddenly shy. I got your letter, today. I wasn't sure you would. Landon seemed frozen in place, afraid to move closer. It was a good letter, Clara said simply. I meant every word. They stood there, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then, in a rush of courage, Clara closed the distance and placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and fast under her palm. I couldn't stop thinking about you, she admitted, even when I told myself it was crazy. Landon's hand came up to cover hers. I thought about you every day, every hour. Show me, Clara challenged softly. Understanding dawned in Landon's eyes. Without a word, he led her into the suite's living room, where papers were spread across a coffee table. Blueprints, sketches, documents. The Alpine project, he explained. I've completely redesigned it. Look. Clara examined the plans, amazement growing as she saw what he had created. Instead of leveling the land for a massive resort complex, the new design worked with the natural landscape. The cabins were sustainable, built with local materials. There was a community center, hiking trails, preserved forest. This isn't what I expected, she said honestly. It's just the beginning, Landon told her. I'm reviewing every project in our portfolio, past and future. Some of my board members think I've lost my mind, and my father... He trailed off with a wry smile. Let's just say he's not happy with the new direction. That must be hard for you, Clara said, knowing how much his father's approval had meant to him. Landon shrugged. Harder than I expected, but also freeing. For the first time in my life, I'm making decisions based on what I believe is right, not what will impress him. And these changes, Clara gestured to the plans, they're because of me. Because of... You, Landon corrected gently. Not for you. You showed me another way to see the world, Clara, a better way. What I do with that insight is my responsibility. The distinction touched her deeply. He wasn't trying to buy her approval or impress her. He was genuinely changing because he wanted to be different. I'm proud of you, she said softly. Landon's smile was both surprised and grateful. No one's ever said that to me before, not like that. Clara looked around the luxurious suite, so different from her simple cabin. This is still your world, though, and mine is still back at the farm. I know. Landon took her hands in his. And I'm not asking you to leave it. I would never ask that. But maybe we could find a way to bridge those worlds. If you're willing to try. What are you suggesting? Clara asked. I don't know exactly, Landon admitted with a laugh. I just know that I don't want to lose you again. These past weeks have been the loneliest of my life, even surrounded by people. You made me feel seen, Clara. Really seen. Clara understood. She'd felt the same connection, the same recognition of something rare and precious. It won't be easy, she warned. We're very different people. Different, yes, but maybe we need what the other has. Landon's eyes were earnest, vulnerable in a way she'd only glimpsed during his time at the cabin. You ground me, remind me what matters. Maybe I can show you that dreams can be bigger than you let yourself believe. My father needs me, Clara reminded him. I know, and I respect that. I'm not asking you to choose. Outside the windows, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. It was nearly midnight, almost Christmas Day. I should go, Clara said reluctantly. Bill Thompson drove me here, but he's gone home now. I need to find a way back. Stay, Landon said simply. Just tonight, there's a guest room. We can figure everything out in the morning. Clara hesitated, then nodded. One night wouldn't change the challenges they faced, but it would give them time to talk, to start building whatever this might become. Merry Christmas, Landon, she said softly. Landon smiled, that rare, genuine smile she'd first seen on their walk through the Christmas tree farm. Merry Christmas, Clara. Later, as Clara stood at the window of the guest room, watching the snow transform the landscape, She thought about the strange path that had led her here. A dangerous storm, a stranger at her door, and now this unexpected chance at something she'd stopped believing in years ago. After her heartbreak in the city, she'd retreated to the safety of home, of familiar routines and limited horizons. She'd told herself it was enough. But standing here now, on the edge of something new and frightening and wonderful, she realized how much she'd closed herself off from possibility. Maybe that was what Landon meant about showing her bigger dreams. Not material dreams of wealth or status, but the courage to open her heart again, to risk pain for the chance at joy. In the next room, Landon lay awake with similar thoughts. The man he'd been just weeks ago wouldn't recognize the man he was becoming. Clara had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years, not just the capacity for love, but for compassion, for purpose beyond profit. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The obstacles were real. Different worlds, different expectations, a lifetime of habits to change. But for the first time, Landon Pierce was willing to face uncertainty without trying to control it. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having passed in the night. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the scent of coffee wafting from the kitchen. When she emerged from the guest room, she found Landon at the small dining table, a simple breakfast laid out. No chef, no staff. He'd prepared it himself. "I'm not much of a cook," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "But I can manage eggs and toast," Clara laughed, the tension between them easing. "It looks perfect." As they ate, they talked about practical things, how often he could visit the farm, how she might spend time in New York occasionally. They talked about Robert, about the Christmas tree business, about Landon's new vision for his company. There were no grand declarations, no promises they couldn't keep. Just two people different in so many ways, finding common ground, one step at a time. After breakfast, Landon drove Clara home himself. As they approached the Bennett farm, Clara felt a moment of worry. How would this look to her father? What would he think? But when they pulled up to the cabin, Robert was waiting on the porch, a knowing smile on his face. "Figured you'd be back. Today," he called out as they approached. "And not alone." Clara hugged her father tightly. "Merry Christmas, Dad. I'm sorry I left last night." "Don't be. Some things are worth going after." Robert extended his hand to Landon. "Good to see you again, son. Under better circumstances this time." Landon shook his hand warmly. "Merry Christmas, sir. I hope I'm not intruding." Nonsense. Clara's mother always said Christmas is better with a full house. Robert gestured toward the door. "Come on in, I've got coffee on and there's presents waiting under the tree." Inside, the small cabin was transformed by Christmas decorations, many of them handmade by Clara and her mother years ago. A modest tree stood in the corner, lovingly decorated with ornaments collected over a lifetime. Landon looked around with genuine appreciation. This was what had been missing from his life. Not just the decorations or the modest gifts, but the warmth, the history, the sense of belonging to something larger than himself. As they settled in for a simple Christmas day, Landon caught Clara, watching him with a thoughtful expression. "What?" he asked quietly. "I was just thinking," she replied, "about how different this must be from your usual Christmas." Landon thought about previous holidays, formal dinners at exclusive restaurants, expensive but impersonal gifts exchanged with his father, parties where everyone was more concerned with networking than celebrating. "It's different," he agreed. "But in all the ways that matter." Later, as evening approached, Landon knew he would need to leave soon. There were still meetings tomorrow, decisions to be made, a company to reshape. The real world waited beyond this Christmas bubble. "I should go," he said reluctantly as they stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the snow-covered trees in gold and pink. "But I'll be back. Next weekend, if that's okay." Clara nodded, leaning against him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Next weekend? And maybe you could come to New York sometime. See my world?" "I'd like that," Clara said, surprised, to realize she meant it. After fleeing the city years ago, the thought of returning had always filled her with dread. But with Landon by her side, she could face those old ghosts. As Landon prepared to leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simply wrapped package. I almost forgot. Merry Christmas, Clara." She unwrapped it carefully to find a delicate silver ornament in the shape of a snowflake. "It's beautiful," she said, turning it to catch the light. "I had it made after I got back to New York," Landon explained, "to remind me of the storm that changed everything." Clara smiled, understanding the symbolism. "I'll hang it on our tree. Every year." The words "every year" hung between them, a cautious hope for a shared future. Not a guarantee, but a possibility neither had imagined just weeks ago. As they said goodbye, the kiss they shared was both a beginning and a promise, not of happily ever after, but of the commitment to try, to grow, to build something real, one day at a time. Landon drove away from the Bennett Christmas tree farm with a sense of peace he'd never known before. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Two different worlds, two different lives trying to find common ground. His father's disapproval, the skepticism of his business associates, the practical challenges of a relationship across such different lifestyles. But for the first time in his life, Landon Pierce wasn't measuring success by his bank account or his next acquisition. Real success, he was learning, was found in moments like this, in connections that changed you, in the courage to be vulnerable, in the willingness to let your heart lead even when logic argued otherwise. As the Bennett cabin disappeared from his rearview mirror, Landon smiled. He wasn't saying goodbye. He was simply taking the first step on a new path, one that would always lead him back to a small Christmas tree farm, and the woman who had taught him that the greatest luxury in life was not what you owned, but who you loved.